Inflation hotter than expected on Friday. The markets closed higher. GDP softer than expected earlier in the week. We saw a huge sell-off. What is Jay Powell and the other members of the Fed, what are they looking at?
Well, they're looking at the inflation numbers for sure, and they're seeing that the service sector inflation is hanging out at 4%, has been there since December, hasn't budged. A lot of that is housing, we understand, but also underlying the high service inflation is a shortage of skilled labor. And I think that's the supply side constraint that the Fed is talking about that may be alleviated. If it's not alleviated, they're going to keep interest rates tight to bring demand in line with supply. But the one thing that for sure the staff is going to be telling the Fed is that we're not going to be expecting so much spending power with all the job creation in the job market. The market is focused on the payroll survey that was released and will be released on Friday, and that's been averaging somewhere around 290, 300,000 jobs per month. But if you look at the other survey, the household survey, it asks people, are you working or not? Did you find a new job? And there, the job creation's only averaged 90,000 since January. So the spending power that is generated by the job market may not be as strong as in the past, and may not be as inflationary as people are afraid of.
Okay, I want to stick with the job market for just a minute. You hit on some different data points, and we on this show have also looked at the downward revisions when it comes to the job numbers. That's also another important part of the story. We get the initial number, and then a lot of times we've seen some downward revisions. I'll hit on something with you. Services, those are up 4% year over year. Goods pretty much unchanged. Remember, all the way back during the pandemic, seems like a lifetime ago, Bill, but it was really goods inflation that led the Fed to hike rates. How do they view this services inflation and the fact that shelter inflation, surprisingly, we thought it was very sticky, it actually eased back a bit?
It has eased back, but the numbers hasn't shown up in the data yet. But the services sector represents 60% of consumer spending. So it's a very big chunk of the underlying inflationary pressures. And the Fed has got to be sure that that is coming down in a decided fashion that we could get to 2%. But when the service sector, 60% of spending is rising at a 4% pace and has been doing so since December, that's not enough to give the Fed confidence that we're on our way to 2%.
All right, so I want to put you in the forecaster seat, Bill. This is one of the toughest jobs anybody has when they come here on CNBC. How do you see the Fed playing out for the rest of the year? Do we get rate cuts before the election? How many cuts do we get this year?
It's very unlikely we're going to see a rate cut until we see that service sector inflation come down. And they're going to have to see 2 or 3 data points of it coming down before they're convinced that things are going their way. So for me, we're talking September, possibly November meeting right after the election. And more likely, those last 2 meetings will be the type of areas where we see the rate cut. And I'm doubting we're going to see more than 2 quarter-point cuts.
Never miss out on savings when you shop with the Ralphs app.